Welcome, everybody. Can you hear me, Hunter? Am I on? All right, perfect. I'd like to welcome everybody to our August 2nd Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the July 8th minutes. Are there any changes that need to be made? If not, I will have a motion.
Make a motion, we approve the minutes as presented.
Have a motion and a second. Any further? All in favor to accept the motions as submitted, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. All right, motion passes unanimously. First item on the agenda is UR 2101, a request of MediaCom for an 115211 utility review for approval of 29,300 linear feet of fiber cable.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is, you'll see a lot of language we went over last month in this review. I do want to say we're excited for all of the communications companies coming in. That's going to help Fairhope greatly. So this is the second one. We should have another large one for you next month. But this is for MediaCom, as we said, almost 30,000 linear feet. This is going to be limited to Firethorn and portions of Stone Creek. As shown on the map and highlighted in the yellow, so there's the aerial and the boundaries of work. This will be a combination of work in the right-of-way as well as through utility easements. There's many crossings, and it is phased out like our utilities have requested so that we can locate those in a reasonable manner, broken out into 750-foot phases. For location purposes, they can work in greater phases. These will require right-of-way permits. I won't read all this, but one of the new things we are requiring is where potholes, utility crossings, they will be potholed and verified by a right-of-way inspector. Instead of going through all these, one I do want to mention is this second bullet point. I would like to move that to a condition of approval that's not listed at the end. But we do not recommend pneumatic boring under the road surfaces. So there's two methods of boring. Pneumatic is not one we want to see under the roads. This is a standard boilerplate for our contractors. They're subject to the business license. Right-of-way permits always kept with a contractor on site. We are requiring them to do hang tags on the doors and have a contact with MediaCom in case there's questions by the residents. They will be working in what appears to be people's front yards. As y'all know, this is oftentimes the right-of-way is confused for front yards. So if there's questions, their points of contact will be on those hang tags, and we will approve those. Standard ordinances of the city will apply. State and federal permits shall be on file if needed. And as-built says after it's done will be provided so that we can incorporate those into our utilities maps. So the staff does recommend approval of UR 2101 with 6 conditions. The horticulturist shall be consulted to determine if the required depth of bore must be increased so that no trees are impacted by the project. The contractor is responsible for any damaged trees. At all street crossing locations, conduct potholing to determine exact location and elevation of existing utilities, reflect the exact elevation of utilities and GPS coordinates of the pothole locations on a set of as-built drawings. An additional right-of-way permit may be required for potholing procedures. Follow-up activities below required by staff and the applicant, and that is upon satisfactory review and approval by right-of-way construction inspector, as-built will be submitted to the map tech for inclusion in GIS utility maps, provide draft door hangers for approval at time of pre-construction meeting, and provide a traffic control plan to right-of-way inspector prior to commencement of any work. And I would like to add the 6th one that no pneumatic boring will be allowed under paved surfaces. That's all that I have for this one. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Hunter. Are there any questions for staff at this time? Is there anyone here on behalf of MediaCom? All right, this is not a public hearing, but does anybody from the public wish to have any input in this? If not, Director, Commissioners?
I move we approve UR 2101, subject to staff recommendations.
A second.
I've got a motion and a second to approve, subject to staff recommendations, including the number 6.
Including the pneumatic.
Drilling. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda is ZC 2110. This is a public hearing to consider the request of Silver Hill Enterprises LLC to establish a initial zoning of PUD concurrent with the conditional annexation of the city of Fairhope to be known as Harvest Green. The property is approximately 193 acres located on the east and west side of 181 near the Waters subdivision.
Mr. Chairman, for the record, I'm going to recuse myself on this one, and I will step out in the hall, and if, once y'all are done handling this business, Hunter will let me know, and I'll come back in.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just so that people in the audience know, this is a zoning request. A PUD actually is a zoning. Since the zoning is an ordinance, the Planning and Zoning Commission does not have the approval or denial ability. We simply make a recommendation to the City Council, who will actually make a motion to approve or deny the PUD. So Hunter, you're up.
So this is a planned unit development with conditional annexation, 375 single-family residential lots. This property is located just north of the Waters on Highway 181 and does have 2 phases. Well, forget about construction phases for a second, but for the purpose of this presentation, there will be a Harvest Green West located on the west side of Highway 181 north of the Waters. And then in the image you see at the lower side of the screen, Harvest Green East, which is, not surprisingly, located on the east side of Highway 181. The total acreage on the site is 193 acres. The applicant, we just said, is Silver Hill Enterprises, TerraCore Development Services, the developer, and SC Civil. David Deal did a lot of the work on this, but Larry Smith is here with SC Civil to represent the engineer of record that designed and is the applicant for the site. And I do want to say the project, and this is a PUD, so it has a master development plan. They've done it very well. You've got the narrative in your packets and also available to the public. Just want to clear up one thing. In our Fairhope parlance, mixed use typically includes commercial. This is kind of labeled as a mixed-use residential. It is mixed-use residential, but it has no commercial, so it's mixing of lot sizes within one development. Do want to point out there is a lot on the eastern side. This is across from the Waters entrance, and you can see on the plan that is projected to be a lot of record that will be turned over to the city for a future fire station. I think they've worked with our volunteer fire department to cite that's been an area of concern, and in this growing area where how do we grow fire service and hit some areas that it takes longer response time. So that has the lot dedicated to the city to be used for a fire station is being offered. So zoning map is on the left. This is unzoned within the county, but zoned, I'm sorry, this is not Fairhope zoned property. It is agriculturally zoned in Baldwin County. Aerial on the right shows the property as currently it's used as farmland. And the site layout, to blow up a little bit closer, the schedule here is have all lots ready to build by November. Tentative schedule, I should say, is to lots ready to be built by November 2023, and 6 years is the projected build out from there. As we said, this is divided into east and west, and there will be proposed 2 developmental phases within each east and west. And those would be, as planned right now, coordinated. So phase 1 of east will begin the same time as phase 1 of west. And then phase 2 will follow. As you all know, and I'll mention for the public, each of those phases will come back to the Planning Commission for a preliminary plat review, and then follow up with final plat review. Many of the questions we might receive and have will be determined during those preliminary plat reviews. So being a PUD, we don't do a deep dive on the technical merits of drainage, traffic, all of those things. So we're looking at this at a pretty high level review at the rezoning and PUD approval process. Each of those things will be reviewed during preliminary plat. So looking a little bit and breaking each side and blowing that up, what you're seeing on the screen here is Harvest Green West. In general, this is where most of the larger lots are located. This is north of the waters and a strip of residential property. This consists of 148 total lots. There are multiple home plans delivered. This is just an example. These are large files, so we didn't include all of these in your packets, just a sampling of the home plans available. There were at least 23 in this one, and then each of those has alternate finishes, if you will, for a variety of housing. This side of the property does not have too much connectivity. If you notice, there's a lake to the north of the property, wetlands to the west. There is a potential for the stub out at the western portion of the southernmost road, as you can see, kind of the hammerhead. But, you know, the lot, as you see to the south of this property, is residential at the moment. So there's not a lot of opportunity for the connectivity on this phase. When we move across the street to Harvest Green East, this is where we have a little bit more denser lots, 227 total. There are 28 home plans as provided as part of the master development plan, but each of those also have different facades and different finishes available for more variety in the housing, so it does not look homogeneous. The connectivity provided on this east side is available pretty much on all phases except for the wetlands on the easternmost portion. But north-south is provided. If you take a look where we looked at the fire station, that is approved by ALDOT, the only crossing from the entrance to the waters all the way across Highway 181. So the northernmost intersection will be right turn, right in, right out. Some of the home plans provided for Harvest Green East are shown here, and again, there were 28, I believe, with alternate finishes. I do want to, this was kind of came in late, but I wanted to emphasize this on Harvest Green East, and let me kind of get you back here. On the northernmost portion of this site, where the small lots are to the north, they have proposed and we highly approve, a 6-foot wooden fence with landscaping that will be a screen to the property to the north. From a pedestrian circulation plan, this is what you see on the screen, and anything in red is a 5-foot sidewalk that meets the conditions of our subdivision regulations. So, and as we'll see in just a second, they have also added, what you don't see on this plan is traffic calming. That has been added within the site plan of the PUD. But I do want to highlight, I think one of the big points of this, positives of this development is the green space. Almost 49 1/3 acres, or almost 26% of the total site is preserved in green space. There's, in addition to the required buffers on the site, you can see the dashed lines here, that's our required buffer. Stay out of those areas is kind of what we tell developers. Well, you can see a lot of these lots provide additional buffering in front of those blue lines in wetland areas. So, and this, I'll kind of show another green space area so it's a little easier to see. I do want to call attention to, because we do ask for pedestrian walkways, sidewalks along Highway 181. There are wetlands on Highway 181. So our concern was getting that pedestrian connectivity to the north and the east. Well, what we suggested and the applicant has provided for is, in addition to the sidewalks that are provided along adjacent to the streets, what you see with the blue line is a crushed asphalt mixed-use trail that will provide that connectivity north and south. But it avoids the wetlands and comes into the site and will be a public easement for those that does wrap around in some of the park green space areas and connects further to the south. The green space is more clearly defined in this plan. Let me back up for a second, because there was as we were looking, this is just last week, staff got to looking at this and some other projects that are on the radar, or at least asking, and we got to looking at this area, Highway 181, and the growth there. There's quite a bit of wetlands and green space area. So we kind of had a thought, as we're looking at this, it would be great if any of those developments provide for a pedestrian connectivity along those wetland buffers. So if we ever had a chance for a grant or something like that in the future, we could provide a trail system. So I called and said, hey, I'm thinking about this. Y'all haven't had time to review that, but I'm thinking about it, and you'll see the highlighted part here that says, if agreeable. There hasn't been much time for their team to really review this, and I think there might be some concerns they can address afterwards. I want to say, if that's an option, it's something we can handle at preliminary plat. If we can alleviate their concern, it doesn't have to be a part of this PUD. So there will be an alternate recommendation on the conditions at the end, but we can just have that conversation and kick that can down the road if agreeable to everyone. So landscape plans were provided. They will need to be reviewed because, like I said, the traffic calming islands and everything were added. The landscape plans were not revised. To show those, we'll be able to handle that at preliminary plat review. So, like I said, not all questions will be answered here at the PUD. There's going to be drainage issues in each preliminary plat. There's going to be O&M and maintenance agreements and how those are maintained, and traffic studies and all of those things. I do want to also kind of look at big picture items. You all know we've discussed SB 107 and what changes that has, and there is I think the city is looking at what we have regulations for. Outside of our city limits, wetland ordinance doesn't apply. Red soil and clay doesn't apply. Sign ordinance. There's many standalone ordinances do not apply anymore. And I commend a developer a little bit. I'm sympathetic to everybody wants to see farmland. But I also commend a developer that's willing to come into the city at a time when those regulations are not on the books and build to a city of Fairhope standard. I do want to acknowledge that this is currently zoned residential agriculture in Baldwin County. From our conversations with the applicant in Baldwin County, that can be changed to R1 administratively at the moment. And it could come in as anything else. So looking at the overall density of this project, it's under 2 units per acre. With all the green space provided, it follows our comp plan that tries to concentrate commercial development and more dense development at the intersections. So with that being said, the staff is recommending approval of Harvest Green PUD to a PUD with conditional annexation. And the reason that R1 is there, it will come in for a microsecond as R1 and then transition to a PUD. We do have 4 conditions of approval that a traffic study for each phase will be done, and will include all the traffic generated and look and see what improvements may or may not be required. We'd ask that communication with AlDOT starts there and have them review that as soon as that traffic study as soon as possible. I know there's already been some communications. Fairhope Utilities will provided availability letters, but final plans and aid to construction costs will need to be coordinated with their respective utility supervisors. Landscape plans shall be revised to include traffic calming islands and devices. and if approved by the city council, 2 printed and bound copies of the master development plan for Harvest Green PUD shall be provided to the city. The alternate there was about the wetland buffers and pedestrian easements. I suggest we listen to the other side's comments on those because they haven't had time to really get back with us. So that's all I have. If y'all have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you, Hunter. Any questions for staff at this time?
I was just, you mentioned briefly the, automobile connectivity to the waters, and it looks like there's that stub out to the north in the waters, so I was wondering why isn't that a condition of approval since we
So-
want connectivity?
This piece of property right here is not a portion of the waters.
Okay, that's not a buffer, that's a separate.
That's right, sorry. Yes, that is privately owned right now, 3 lots.
That's a strange piece of property.
Sorry.
Okay,
Yes, that is 3 lots. That is not a common area of the waters.
okay,
So not something that can be required right
that
now
makes
at the
more
time.
sense, okay.
But we could still do a stub out there, couldn't we? I mean, like we did on the waters, if that were ever redeveloped,
Just
you
a
know,
line, 2 stub outs.
they could have a road down the middle, lots on either side backing up to Harvest Green and the waters and, have an intersection there and have their connectivity from them. Because it looks big enough. What size are these lots in Harvest Green? I don't see any sizes on them.
Yes, and I do believe TerraCore will have a little presentation on here. They've clearly shown those. So, and it was in the staff report. I didn't pull that on the slides exactly.
It's in there.
When I don't want to steal their slides, Thunder, so once we get through here, they do have a slide that will show those lot sizes.
Okay.
There's 3 different lot sizes in west and 3 different lot sizes on the east side and the west side. So they vary a little bit, larger in general being on the, next to the waters.
Great. Thank you, Hunter.
And are you gonna run through these? Okay. All right. Larry Smith with SE Steel will present for the client, and they do have a few slides as well.
Good evening. How are y'all doing? So as Hunter was mentioning, the lots that we're referring to on Harvest Green West that are along the southern property line, those are 100-foot lots, and I'll kind of answer that question here in just a minute as I go through the slides. I'll get back to that. We're pleased to present Harvest Green. Been working on this for a long time. As Hunter mentioned, we are looking at developing both sides of 181. Harvest Green West is obviously on the west side. Harvest Green East is on the east. A total of 193 acres, total of 375 lots with a density just under 2 units per acre. We're almost at 50 acres of green space, and the lots range from 52 to 100 feet. And Harvest Green West is a total of 82.77 acres, about 148 lots, and it's not an exact, but it's about a third of each lot size is what you're looking at, with our largest lot size going to be to the south, closer to the waters, then go to your medium, and then the smaller lot sizes. In Harvest Green West, we have the smallest being a 56-foot lot, with the largest being a 100-foot lot. One of the, it's not the only issue, but one of the issues that we would have is there's going to be a drainage ditch that is going to be flowing along that southern line. As far as the question about a stub out, the ultimate thing is, in conversations with that property owner, they don't want any type of potential access through them, so we're trying to honor that, just like we're honoring the landscape buffer from the other adjacent property owner on the east side. So that was kind of where that came from, is just honoring what requests we've had from the adjacent property owners. And I'm guessing the Waters probably doesn't want us one day to connect any in either.
Yeah, but that's why that we put the stub there, was to connect, and
on the west, we have several amenities, including a pool, a playground, pavilion, restrooms, basketball court, then open rec area, and then community trail system going through the wetlands that Hunter had mentioned earlier. And here's where we're discussing the lot sizes. As I said earlier, on the west side, the smallest lot is a 56-foot lot. We also have 82-foot lots and then 100-foot lots. And like I said, it's close to a third of each lot size within each development. Hunter mentioned there's a lot of different house options. We put a few more in the presentation than what he had. But within the full packet, if y'all have those, you can see the different house options that people will have to choose from. Harvest Green East is a total of 110.26 acres with 227 lots. That one's just over 2 units per acre with total green space of 30.39 acres. And this one has a lot range going from 52 to 75 feet. And the amenity package on this side, we have the pool, playground, pavilion, restrooms, pond, the open rec area, and the community trail system as well. And then lot sizes here range from 52 to 75 foot. And again, it's a kind of an even distribution on those lot sizes. I'm going to back up a few slides and just point out the area also that Hunter was mentioning. And the latest ISO report, this general area was mentioned as a place where the city needed a fire station. And so in our early talks with the city, we said we could gladly provide an area for that. And as you can see, that is, we're proposing that off of the main entrance that lines up with the waters, because that's the only full access location that we would have along 181, along the entire frontage here. And that way the fire trucks could go north or south from that area. So that's down towards the main entrance on the southern side. And here are some of the typical house plans for the east side of 181. All right. And that's all I've got. And I'll answer any questions that y'all have.
I've got a question, Larry. What about with Publix just south of here? Y'all have any thought about sidewalk access along 181? I mean, what does AlDOT typically allow? I mean, this is 300 and some odd lots that are within walking distance of. Yeah, but that doesn't get you out on the sidewalk that's going to get you down to Publix is what that is. Any thoughts on that?
So we're proposing sidewalks, but as was mentioned earlier, there's some drainage areas that are concerned, and we're trying to get you in and out within the confines of the property. And so if you're going from one side of the property to the other, you should be able to hit it if there was ever another project to bring sidewalks in front of the residential property to our south, and then in front of the waters, and then so on. But AlDOT doesn't typically want their, thank you.
I'm thinking about something to the north. I mean, you've got sidewalk that'll bring you through the development and out to 181, but what about when you've got somebody to the north of you?
Well, that's what I was saying. If you look at the blue line, the very north of the property, you can come, if you're heading south on 181, we'll have a sidewalk along 181, and then they'll enter into that internal road system that we're permitting culvert with the core on, and then you'll come back out. So you'll just dive onto that one road and then come back out, versus trying to cross those wetlands in multiple places, because AlDOT's not going to let us do it in the right of way. We'd be basically coming 100 feet over from where we're doing our culvert crossing and then making another crossing across the wetlands.
I'm just thinking about the people that are going to be living along that piece of street right there with 200 lots to the north of it, and everybody coming through their area of the subdivision. They'll be back up here in our faces. Anyway, I'm curious. I don't have any idea what AlDOT's attitude about the sidewalk along there.
In the right of way, they don't want them in the right of way. That's why a lot of times we'll give easements along the back side of the right of way.
But they're all right with them off, inside of your property?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, any other questions for the developer? All right, thank you, Larry. I'll go ahead and,
Oh, yeah,
On the other easements and
we haven't had a whole lot of time to digest it, but right now our main concern is the type of potential liability in these common areas that are owned by the HOAs, providing open access to the public. So we'd like to have more time. I would not want that to be a condition at this point, and we can get more time to discuss it with their legal folks and with Hunter. But right now, we can't support that idea just because it could potentially be a liability issue.
And I want to be clear, because all of our conversations to date, those blue lines that are shown on the screen, we have assumed those will have public access because it negates the ability of providing a sidewalk on 181. What we're talking about here is a pedestrian easement for an unplanned, as of yet, walkway in the wetland area. So that's the distinction on what we're assuming.
thank you, Hunter. Thank you, Larry.
Thanks.
This is a public hearing. I'll go open the public hearing at this time. This is ZC 2110 Harvest Green. It's on both sides of 181, just to the north of the Waters subdivision. Does anybody wish to speak to this item? Yes, sir. And I know Emily knew you, but we have a new secretary, so you have to say your name and your address now.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Gary Gover, and I live at 300 Lincoln Street in Fairhope. You've already touched on the concerns I had when I saw this material in the packet over the weekend. When I go back to the comprehensive plan and the fact that this development and a number of other developments that are on the agenda tonight are in effect neighborhoods within what's to be a walkable village. The walkable village being centered to the south at the intersection of 181 and 104. And there's also a commercial center to the north, a contemplated commercial center. In the comprehensive plan, in order to have a walkable community, these neighborhoods do require a great deal of connectivity. And an additional factor, in addition to pedestrian and bicycle transportation, there's an emerging, evident, strong need for neighborhood electric vehicle accommodations. So we're also going to have people with street legal golf cart sort of vehicles that certainly will want to travel up and down, north and south, east and west, in order to get to the commercial centers and to the village center. So there's a whole lot of movement of other than vehicular transportation that ought to be accommodated in these designs when looking at the larger picture of the walkable village. And I don't think that what I see on these individual neighborhoods or PUDs doesn't give me a strong feeling of the walkability emerging. And I think that walkability is critically important for the stabilization of our environment, for the long-term view between now and 2050, and so on. When I look in the comprehensive plan, some of the things I see were that in the village center itself, along with the development of the area, automobile access should be being contemplated. And I think that's a real complicated problem. The way the intersection of 104 and 181 is developing, I'm not sure it's going to turn into a village center for a walkable village. But there should be, it says in the plan, the way we saw it 4 or 5 years ago, integration of right-of-way improvements, turn lanes, signals, sidewalks, landscaping, street lighting, push pad signals, crosswalks, and similar infrastructure should be comprehensively evaluated by the city And this would result in a right-of-way and roadways being upgraded in conjunction with the development and so on and so forth. I'm not seeing that yet. I think the big picture's being a little bit neglected. So I think we need to get on that.
I understand what you're saying and don't want to be argumentative, but, you know, we have required a sidewalk, you know, to connect on the north and the south of each of those that will tie in if there's ever a sidewalk on the road, and we can't control AlDOT, you know, them being the state, they're, you know, up the food chain from us. So
Right.
we can't have them, and I see the sidewalks and walkability throughout the subdivision. So what kind of changes are you referring to?
Well, I didn't want to get too particular. I didn't want to get down to the design level. I'm just thinking, you know, what we need to be thinking about. The pedestrian and bicycle connections and parking should be incorporated into the design of the nodes. That would be the commercial center and the village center. So I think we need to be looking out to those centers that are outside these neighborhoods as a part of, you know, how the big plan comes together down the road. Connectivity should remain an important focus, in the development of residential neighborhoods. Looks a little weak on the connectivity. And that's about it. That's my main concern. I thought, you know, for walkable villages to emerge, which is what we had in mind over the last couple of decades, there has to be a lot more combination of modes of transportation other than vehicular. Otherwise, this is just going to be more big SUVs and stuff driving to the Publix and, you know, back and forth, and that's not going to cut it.
Well, boy, thank you so much.
Chairman,
Okay.
That is a good point about the utility vehicles. I mean, it's for as far away as people try to drive those things to get down into Fairhope.
Yeah.
And as big a problem is you can't put one of those on 181 by any stretch of the imagination.
So, and I do want to highlight, because sometimes we have many conversations, this has been a couple of months, and highlight a conversation we've had and some of the feedback we've had, and show how that gets refined in a plan. We did look at those things. Highway 1, immediately, well, you got to have a sidewalk along Highway 181. And they showed, well, here's the greens, here's the wetlands areas, and, you know, we looked at it and, okay, well, how would a person walking connect? You can see that. They're going to come in the blue line, they're going to walk on the sidewalks. How would a person on a bike or even the low-speed vehicle, not a golf cart, but a low-speed vehicle coming through, they can come on that mixed use. Our vision was the blue line is a mixed-use trail that's similar to what you see on Greeno Road, that would be able to handle that, and it's crushed asphalt. I think that's a good.
How wide is it?
That's my
Well,
question.
And that's, we can ask the vision of the developer on that, but that was what we were talking. So the blue line can take you
7 feet.
either to the sidewalk or to the roadway. Since they're low-speed vehicles, they're street legal, then they can work in and out of these. So every red line you see, every blue line you see is pedestrian connectivity. And we're even asking for more through the wetlands for something that may be a potential project. We don't know if we'll ever have enough land collected together to ask for a grant and have connectivity through those wetlands. So of anything within this, I think our pedestrian connectivity is really solid. You see sidewalks on either side of every street. You see connectivity to the south. You see connectivity to the north, to the east, you know, and projects that we've seen at the intersection. We've also ensured that those connectivity measures are there. So, you know, I want to, maybe we did a poor job of highlighting all of those, the way we're thinking about the use of this and critiquing projects when we look at them for their adherence to the comp plan and making sure those connectivity issues. There is a misnomer of what a village center is. And I want to address that because there are portions in our zoning code that show what a village center are. Those are elective. And as Lee, you've been here longer than me, but I don't think we have any zoning type using those village center zoning types, village nodes and those village residential, that would be something the applicant would request, and we don't have those. So things within there are not something that we can look at and say you're required to do this. We can certainly suggest those, but, nobody's coming to us wanting to do mixed use developments on Highway 181, stacked flats and those sort of things. And we don't have a requirement for that. So we have a voluntarily, if you want to rezone to those, and we just haven't had anybody take us up on that in the years that we've been around, so.
Thank you, Hunter. Would anybody else wish to speak to this item, Harvest Green, ZC 21.1? All right, in that case, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time and turn the meeting over to the commissioners.
Make a motion, Mr. Chairman, case number ZC 21.10.
Can we discuss it just a little bit before you do that?
Well, yeah, but you got to step up.
Without, man, it's like a quarter second. I feel, I get the pedestrian connectivity, and that seems like a good workaround with the wetlands. And I'm not quite sure about the golf carts going through there, but if that seems to make sense too. I feel like if the waters was required to have that stub out, that we should have a stub out that aligns with it. And that is aligned with our connectivity.
I agree with that totally. That's probably a 30-acre parcel in between there, and it's just got 3 lots on it. So the odds of it staying 3 lots for the next 10 years with that growth out there, I mean, maybe it will, but.
And it intersects with the big lot, not one of the little ones.
And would we do that now, or would we do that later at the subdivision?
I would ask for that to be shown. You can make that a condition to be illustrated at preliminary plat. I don't think we need to hold up for that. That's a condition that can be handled with this condition.
I mean, I don't think it would hurt anything. They could slide it in pretty easily, and then if that lot's never developed, then fine.
And, we can look at preliminary plat, whether it's actually installing the paving in that area or leaving it in case it never
Or
happens.
just a green space that's an easement.
There's.
Well, and ultimately, you've got 100 houses there. You've got 33, 30, 35, 40 acres in the middle that could be 60, 70 lots. And then you've got the waters, and if people, are going to dinner from one subdivision to the other, you're just trying to keep people off of 181 constantly. Just,
Yeah.
if you've got friends, they can go back and forth to each other's houses and not have to get on 181, which is, pretty crazy road right now.
Yeah, and
And
they're
it's-
public streets, so, they should connect. It shouldn't be like at 3 resorts next to each other.
Yeah, and I agree. I got my lesson on connectivity. Researched how long Fairhope's been implementing that, and I think that's one thing that sets us aside. It's been upheld. We've upheld that connectivity for a long time, so.
It's a good thing.
Hunter, I have a question on your comprehensive plan part where you put in about that there's going to be space for a park near St. Michael's. Can you elaborate on that? Where it says comprehensive, it says immediate adjacent to the St. Michael's School, open space for our plan, recommended for a park.
I gotta read what I said. We're writing
Page
a lot right
7.
now.
So he has the big one and the small one, same owner.
One of those 2 little lots is a hair studio. Yes. Dana, little deal, Gordy's wife, Dana's got a hair studio on one of those lots.
She might want to stop.
That was where we worked, so
Right there, Sam.
to the west of this, you'll run it, if you go directly west of this, or east of this, you'll run into St. Michael's. So that was referring to those. You see the dash lines on the far east and west of the page, that's buffer So if, the logic there is if we could ever collect enough of those pedestrian easements as projects are approved, including potentially St. Michael's property, and there's another property on the agenda tonight to the south and other ones coming. If we could collectively have enough of those together with pedestrian easements, we could approach grants for parks, for trails in those buffers. So little bigger picture that we might never receive, but it
It's
would
like
be,
a big stretch.
but it'd be easier to have the easements now.
I
and
mean, I
that's-
love it. It sounds great. It's a little,
Well, if you don't dream, you can't ever get anything done. And
well,
a
I
lot of
like
towns
the
that has
dream, but I
these.
just don't want to be misled
Yeah.
on what you're conveying.
Oh, no, the question came up this past week, and I'm completely okay. There's been short time for them to contemplate the legal issues and liabilities. So it's something we can look at preliminary plat if it's feasible.
Okay, that was,
Not something we need to address tonight on that portion.
okay.
For the pedestrian easements, and we weren't asking anybody to install anything. But there's national parks grants and things like that that are available, that if we ever had enough where they were actually connected to something other than isolated developments, then we can look at a more global approach of how to connect all of those in an environmentally kind of full project.
Kind of like the Cabo River up in Birmingham.
Blue line,
Yeah, like
kind of those
blueways.
blue line walkways and.
Birding trails and
greenways.
blueways.
Yeah.
I had it, this is probably the next level of development kind of question, but when you have a sidewalk arrangement like this, and again, I think that's a creative solution, I'm not opposed to it, but you go into the development now, and it is a public street, so of course, how do you, are there any best practices to make that feel welcoming and not make it feel like, oh, I'm about to go into a private development, I should turn around, I'm not welcome here?
Yeah, so details within some of these areas that are gonna make the difference is going to happen. I think a lot of times by the landscape or civil, and that will be done more in detail at the preliminary, so where there's just kind of blobs shown as green space and park.
Yeah.
Those are defined by how you program those. And, sometimes it's just as simple as having a couple of sitting areas and grading it where it's gentle enough to use as part, kids to run around. So that's, I think the details come out in the preliminary plat. And as Mr. Gary stated, how is the pedestrian connection? Where's the crosswalks? Where's the?
That's kind of what I
stop
meant is
signs?
if we're guiding pedestrians going up and down 181 through here to make it clear that they are actually being guided through there. It's not a mistake. It's not the end of the line. They'll come out at the other end. They're not just going into something with no outlet.
One other thing, let me mention something to you about your connectivity. The stub out in the waters, the little strip of property that is between there and this piece, Harvest Green, is a private drive. There are 2 lots in there. One of them currently has a hair salon on it, and that private drive serves a residence. So that's just for y'all for consideration. I think y'all probably already knew that.
Yeah. No, I mean, but we get, and this is the tough thing sometimes, nobody ever wants connectivity. The people who develop it don't want to do it. The people that are connecting to don't want to do it. That's where we, are looking for that connectivity to solve those problems, because if everything's isolated and there's only one point of ingress, egress, we got problems on our roads.
It's a greater good
So
issue.
and I think that's a reasonable.
I mean, today you could not get in or out of the waters.
I'm sorry,
Today you could not get in or out of the waters
well,
because they had it blocked off for the construction. So there's about a 2-hour time period. If you were in the waters, you just were stuck in there.
I'm just making a point.
I'm
I'm
just
not
saying-
saying whether that's good or bad. I'm just telling you that
Yeah,
it's not
I'm
like
just
it's
saying that even
a
around
blank
us-
piece of strip of property there. It's someone's driveway and an access to an existing business.
Right, but it's 33 acres, and it's not going to be one driveway and an access to somebody's business for probably the next 20 years. And if it is, it's fine. We're not hurting a darn
Well, the
bit.
two,
Then there'd just be
the two
downtown.
lots make it the two little commercial lots in there make it very narrow to the south of them by the waters.
Yeah.
And the driveway is to the north. So it's just something to consider when you're talking about connectivity. Know what it is, know the full problem of what you've got when you're facing, trying to put a road in to connect with the waters. I mean, it's
Well,
not,
Since we required it of the waters, it makes, I mean, it's not that, we don't even have to require a road, but requiring an easement that aligns with the road from the water seems like it would provide the greatest flexibility for potential future connectivity, even if it never
That's
happens.
right.
There's
Oh,
just
I
a
agree.
basic green
I mean,
space.
I agree with that. The idea would be if that little strip was owned by the people that own the property that Harvest Green was gonna be, but it's just completely separate owner.
I understand that, but you've got a 300-foot by 2,000-plus foot parcel there that may remain like it is forever, but I doubt it. And all that might be purchased and bulldozed by one person.
Well, it may be, that's right.
And that's why you just want to leave that option open.
Well, you can put, that's right, but the point I'm trying to make is, you can make a stub out there, and that's it, but if you're talking about going ahead and requiring them to have connectivity, you've got a whole different problem
No,
associated
we're
with
just
it.
asking for a stub out to leave the future options open.
That's fine.
And as the subdivision regulations require.
Okay, good.
Because, you've got a 30, 40 acre parcel there that at some point, I mean, it's certainly not highest and best use at this point, so at some point it'll be redeveloped.
Well, it accesses someone's home is what I guess the point is.
I understand. But you take the value of 30 to 40 acres right there, and I don't, and at some point, somebody might purchase the whole kit and caboodle, is all I'm saying, and you're leaving that option open.
Maybe,
Miss Cordy's home is, there were homes, where a lot of these subdivisions are, and a lot of these
That's right.
homes have been taken down, so. All right, anyway, you got a motion still?
I did. I think I did, but I forgot now. Case ZC 21.10 Harvest Green. I move that we recommend to the city council approve it. Subject staff recommendations.
Can we add with the addition of a
Stub out for connectivity.
or an easement for future connectivity? Like, they don't
I
have to
think
pave it,
stub
I don't
out
think.
between lots
'Cause they've done it
15 and
already.
16. All right, subject to the stub out?
It's going to have to be just to the west of that westernmost lot that sticks down on that 33 acres or whatever that strip is.
Yeah, aligned with the stub out in the waters. But that is 15 and, I can't zoom in
15
far
and
enough.
16.
15 and 16.
All right. I've got a motion to approve subject to staff recommendations and a stub out lined up with the stub out at the waters. Do I have a second? Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously.
And I will, for the record, just clarify that the alternate condition is not part of that.
Yes.
Did what?
The alternate condition that we showed on the slide, not in your packet for the wetland easements, is not a part of that.
For future consideration.
We can talk about that in the future, but not a condition tonight.
Correct. Nice proposal, Larry. I figured somebody else did it. No, I'm joking. All right, next item on the agenda, SD subdivision 2134, public hearing to consider the request of FST Cordy Family Trust for preliminary approval of Rockwell Townhomes 206-unit multiple occupancy project.
All right. So this is Rockwell Apartments, not townhomes. Several of the drawings have reflected townhomes. It has been clarified that they are Rockwell Apartments, and it's 206 units, a multiple occupancy project. It's approximately 36 acres. It is on the east side of 181, across from the waters. Actually, similar aerials to what you have just seen. This is directly south to the properties that we looked at for the conditional annexation to a PUD for Harvest Green. Here's the site layout. There'll be a main entrance off of 181. Utilities are labeled and remain to be private on the inside of the development. Any connections and work in ALDOT right-of-way will require permitting from ALDOT. Water to be aid to construction costs to extend the water main, provide a master meter, and any other required improvements will be required at time of building permit. Sewer is provided by Baldwin County Sewer Systems. Power is Riviera Utilities. Gas, not requested at this time. Communications provider is not known. There's not a utility letter provided for them. Trash pickup will be provided by Baldwin County Solid Waste in individual cans for each apartment unit. As we saw on the zoning screen, the property is unzoned and not inside the corporate limits, but falls within our planning jurisdiction. A traffic study was completed, and the recommendation was a northbound right turn lane installed, and it is shown on the plans. The improvements by ALDOT currently for 181 does not include the median access at this location, so it'll be a right out only and be required to make a U-turn at the next available access, which is potentially at the Waters subdivision, to make a U-turn to go south. The drainage in general travels west to east. The site is primarily flat and runs east across the site. It's collected in underground pipes. Stormwater is then collected into 2 retention ponds. Staff has not received any comments from Baldwin County engineer or their review of the drainage plans. The O&M plan or the operation and maintenance plan for that drainage system will need to be revised to reflect the changes made in the stormwater system. Their landscaping that was shown, and I have a map of the landscaping plan here with some edits on it, but did not conform to the table 4.1 in our subdivision regulations. The labels were added as passive or active recreation, but there were no actual enhancements that were included in that to show what that might actually include other than a grassed field. There's 32% green space as shown. There's 25% is required. Much of the green space areas are between the buildings and driveways or areas conceived as rear yards. The pool amenity area is the only common area that has a shown community access without walking through the side yard of another building. The retention ponds would require fencing and landscaping. Currently, the plans only show sod as ground cover. This is their landscaping, or not landscaping, excuse me, their green space plan. The notes in red were added. This did not receive a revised digital copy. This represents what was shown. The north and southern portion were labeled for passive recreation. The middle of green spaced areas, the one on the left side of your screen is where the pool amenity area is, and that is part of the active green space. And then there on the other side of the street, there is another area labeled for active green space. All internal drainage streets, utilities are requested to remain private and would have to be maintained by either the owner, an HOA or POA. It says we do not have a wetland report. We actually got a wetland determination letter indicating no wetlands this morning. We need to clarify the owner name on the site plan was different from what was listed on the application, and any future subdivision of the property shall be restricted. There were 2 waiver requests. One of the first waiver requests was to not provide access to any adjacent property, so this property would be isolated and there would not be any connectivity. The second was a waiver request to allow for private streets. Our subdivision regulations require connectivity and public streets. The right-of-way, as shown, is a 24-foot paved road that is going through, that makes a loop through the development and has the roads in the going through the center, going east to west. So that's the recommendation for the waiver request is to deny, and overall recommendation due to the lack of connectivity, the private streets, and the other small issues left unresolved, leaves a request for denial. The applicant is here this evening, Mr. Tom Mitchell, along with Doug Chafin with Sawgrass Engineering, that can answer any questions, and I'll be happy to answer any questions on behalf of staff.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions for staff at this time? All right, thank you. In that case, if anybody likes to speak on behalf of the developer,
Good evening, Commissioners. Doug Chaffin with Sawgrass. Listening to the discussions lately, I think we've gotten a lesson too on connectivity. We've kind of gone back and forth, and that was one of the two big items that I want to discuss in here. And we have since talked about, and we have done an updated plan, just haven't given them time to do their review of it, where we will show connectivity and we'll show connectivity to the adjacent properties to the north. We've had some previous discussions with someone who may come into the south, and we'll work that. If we don't have anything, we'll show a connectivity there. We've got some grade issues with connectivity to the east, but we can show a stub street and work that out. The developer's willing to do that, and we'll move forward with those plans.
Would you like to hold this over to the next month?
Well, there's some other things I would like to discuss before we get to that point, and maybe get some clarification on. What the other item there is the private roads and how that's done. This is in county property, and their subdivision regulations require for an apartment complex for the developer to maintain the private streets in there, and they will not maintain those roads within there. So there is a bit of a conflict between the county and being within the Fairhope ETJ, having to deal with that. In these ETJs, and we do a little juggling act of sending plans to both locations. They've had a full set of plans to review for quite some time as well. Some of that process, they're waiting on comments that we get back from you guys. So before I request a table or moving forward, I would like to have that discussion on how we resolve that potential issue there.
Can I highlight a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead, Hunter.
Okay. So, Commissioner, we have seen, and I'll reflect back to Carmel Park Flats off Twin Beach Road and some other apartments that we've looked at. It is not beyond reason to think that there's a private drive within an apartment complex. Most of those we look at, you come in and you loop around and you come out. There is also a portion of our subdivision regulations that talks about lot and block subdivisions and what those street standards are. And if you saw a loop here, our review would be kind of simple. There's a drive around just similar to other apartment complexes that are designed in unzoned Baldwin County areas. That would be a private drive, and while it may have a street name, it's still a private drive for accessing those. Where I think our lot and block designs and talking about private streets not being allowed is where this kind of triggers that, and it's where you're squeezing so much in. And when it is lot and block, it should be public streets. So that's a little bit of a challenge we're having and making distinction on. So that's where I don't know what the Baldwin County stance is on accepting roads. I do not doubt.
We have talked with Baldwin County, and they have no interest in maintaining the roads within this apartment development.
But this is, and that's a little bit of a conflict within the ETJs where our subdivision regulations apply, but there's an entity that would have to take over the roads. So when we look at it, we can get behind a design that has a loop, but that doesn't benefit them because all of those central units would be removed. So, there's a conflict between what the design and developer wants to build versus two entities and our regulations and what the county would be willing to accept.
This is very similar to Old Battles Place. It's done same development, same.
Well, it's similar in the design. It certainly is. And Old Battles Place, was zoned R5, and it was kind of in an area that didn't have any traffic issues. It still doesn't. And love that subdivision, by the way. Didn't care for the breaking of the eggs, making the omelet, but the omelet turned out pretty darn good at the end of the day. But overall, the concern here is this is such a different spot. I have to sit here and listen to, I won't name any names, Art Dias, just complain about the 104, 181 intersection and how even the Rose 4 lane that's going to be overflowed ahead of time. And here, if we have something just kind of work as a dam where everybody's got to go out on 104, if you see the main thing, the spirit of what we're trying to do, ultimately, we'd love to be able to get people from every one of these subdivisions and this apartment to Publix to, 104 without getting on 181 if possible. Just the more people you can get off of 181, the more people you can keep out of that light, an intersection, the better. Whether, somebody from this apartment's a friend of somebody that's in the subdivision next door or wants to go get a gallon of milk at Publix, the more we can keep people off of the road, the better it is. Kind of like where you've got the Publix up in, next door to the apartments, in Fairhope, just a couple miles to the west. They can walk, take their golf cart, bike or whatever to, a restaurant, to a, bank, to a fitness place. And that's what we're kind of looking for, is just the more we can get people to get from point A to point B off of 181.
Agreed. And we're going to show, I've gone through the process. Currently, there's 206 units shown with those access points, stub-out streets. There takes away 6, so there'll be 200 units at that point.
Yeah, but the density is not a huge, compared to most apartments, it's not a hugely dense deal. Maybe we could do a couple, 2 stories to make those units up or anything. To us, the biggest concern, to me at least, I should say, is just, funneling everybody out on 181. You look at how Atlanta and Houston and some of those places that grew really fast grew. And if you look at Atlanta, every single road, when you fly out and look down, it's a cul-de-sac going out onto a feeder street, cul-de-sac going out on a feeder street. And, just driving through Atlanta is a nightmare, for that reason. You don't have, a lot of alternative routes and connectivity. If you just want to go, people talk to me about driving 2.5 miles to their job and being in the car for 45 minutes. That's, what we're trying to prevent in the future, not, just today, but in the future. And that's the goal. And if y'all could, whether the streets have to stay private or not, just figure out some way where people could get from the north to the south without 181. I think that, to me, that would be the, kind of the spirit of the law of what we're looking for.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, I'm looking at ownership plat, and basically the 40 acres immediately south down to the intersection. Is that, obviously that's the same owner?
No,
To the piece that you're proposing to do this development on, the owner to the south on that 40 acres is basically the same owner. So, it seemed to me like it'd be a no-brainer to get down to 104.
Now, we have had discussions with preliminary discussions with a development that may come in there, and will provide connectivity to that. There was a commercial component to it that was up at the west end, and residential component to it that was on the east end of it. But we were agreeable to make that connection. We just didn't get enough information at the time, and it's not totally viable right now. We don't have enough information to know exactly where that connection's made, but we'll definitely show it, and we can work with the property owner to see if that connection can be made and what that development's going to look like.
This piece is the Cordies. The piece down on the south of it, the 40 acres to the south that brings you out to 104 is the Cordies. The piece to the east are the Higbees, which would take you over to Higbee Road eventually. But there are a lot of opportunities, and maybe that's something that would be beneficial to explore that before. Because AlDOT has told us in the past that once they get the 4-lane completed down to 104, that's going to alleviate all of the problems associated with traffic issues at that intersection. And all I point out is Go any day you want to go to Highway 64 from 7 until 9 o'clock in the morning and from 4 until 6 in the evening. In the morning, the traffic is backed up 3 miles going toward Loxley, coming west. And they already finished that intersection. Did a heck of a job, didn't they?
Well, we're going to do our due diligence to make sure, and I've talked with the Higbee owner and about making that connection. There's no plans for that as of right now. And there may be some grade issues, but we'll show the Stub Out Street there and let him know, where that location is. And
Are you looking for other info associated or comments about your development,
And
your
I
proposal?
want to bring up one kind of point of clarification, because Doug's completely right. Old Battles Place is, it's an asset to the city. Clump, the PUD, where we're going to be seeing the preliminary plats going through, is a similar development. And those are zoned, and we support those. What a little concern that we have, and just want the planning commission to consider, is these are subdivision governing unzoned properties. So those have less subjectivity in the application of those. This is, still a little bit of a gray area, and we're leaning on, for points of clarification. We've got plenty of examples of where a property comes in and loops around and comes out and connects, and allowing a private drive. Does this appear to be a lot and block where it requires public roads? And I think we also have this issue with the county not being willing to accept those things. So that just wanted to be clear on why we've made the distinction between some of those other projects that we've approved.
Well, you've got 206 units right here that access a newly created 4-lane with no opportunity to you got one in, one out.
And I do think,
Wait a minute, one in, one out, and you can only turn right. And then you got to go up and make a U-turn on a 4-lane to come back to the south. Now, a lot of U-turns on 4 lanes, I know there are. But the point is, there may be options available to help alleviate that problem too.
yeah, and that's the dilemma with the other projects we've seen. They're zoned within the city, and we can make amends without creating a precedent. So our challenge here is how do we accommodate that in unzoned without creating a precedent? I think we saw a plan as we walked in. I don't think providing connectivity is the issue. I think they're going to supply that for us. We've seen the plan. We just haven't had a chance to review it, and don't want to, we've kind of, I think the first time we had a pre-application meeting was 3 months ago now, 4 months ago. We brought these same things up, so we haven't had a chance to review that.
The private road issue, how do you require a private road, a public road, if somebody doesn't want to accept it?
Accepted. And
Yeah, that seems like kind of a problem.
that kind of breaks our subdivision regulations.
Yeah, but the issue has to do with the county, and again, the conflict between, it's not a conflict, but the difference between the county and the city. One of the opportunities, certainly the piece of property right north of this has requested that the city annex them in and then they'll do their development. So certainly you're south, you're closer, not you, but your client is closer. So one way to eliminate that conflict, annex into the city.
And it could be built to a public standard, but remain private.
That's
another option.
Pretty simple option right there to alleviate that problem.
Now, all these are being built to Baldwin County standard roads, so it's not.
Well, it's our that's the conflict. We have the subdivision regulations that apply.
So
And those, yeah.
is the owner not interested in annexation?
We'll discuss it.
I think
That's
if
one option.
I think you've gotten a lot of input. We can open the public hearing and vote on this, so you can work with the staff and come back next
I
month.
think we'll work with the staff.
And if you do that, I think y'all can work this stuff out with them pretty
Can
easily.
we just add one other comment, because I see other people looking at the green space plan that I think we'd like to see more defined green space, like what more landscaping
Okay.
and meeting the landscape ordinance and a more usable green space.
And not count the green space between two townhomes,
Yeah.
the yard between two ground homes. Anyway,
And we have set the fence back, and there is sidewalk along 181 on our side. So there's a
right.
plan for that.
And Mr. Chairman, just for the clarification, so the developer's willing to table the agenda item for the next meeting? All right, thank you.
I'm sure y'all work out, it'll look good at the end of the day. Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is SD 2135, correct? Am I in the right place? SD 2135, public hearing to consider the request of Craig Homes, Inc. for a plat approval of Point Clear Estates, a 3-lot minor subdivision.
This is Point Clear Estates, minor subdivision. The property is approximately 3 acres, and it's located at the intersection of Polo Ridge Boulevard and Willow Bridge Drive. This property is unzoned as well. Here's a copy of the plat. The lots are over 100 foot wide, and each of them approximately an acre in square feet. It's lots 1, 2, and 3 labeled on the plat, just across from Willow Bridge Drive. Existing flow patterns for drainage will not change. There's not any installation of any infrastructure, therefore the street plan, landscape plan, and tree protection plan are not required. There was not a traffic study triggered. There was a variance from installing sidewalks was requested. Staff recommends including a sidewalk easement on the plat, which is in our subdivision regulations. So there is no waiver required for that, just adding that easement onto the plat. And it's very similar to a 3-lot subdivision that was actually done across the street in Polo Ridge, where a 10-foot sidewalk easement was included on the plat to allow for a future sidewalk. Staff's recommendation is to approve with the following condition: a revision of the plat to illustrate the sidewalk easement along Polo Ridge Boulevard. Staff?
can I
Yes,
ask
sir?
you a question?
Yes, sir. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Does that, I'm looking at the plat, does that include the sidewalk that's in the actual road right-of-way? Or is it sidewalk you're recommending on the property to be
The
provided?
sidewalk easement would be on the property itself.
Not as it's depicted on this plat?
That's correct.
That's not the plat I'm looking at. The one you got up here right now?
Mhm.
You got another plat on that you can pull up here?
No, I don't have another one I can pull up on the screen.
In our packet.
So let me clarify.
In that one right there.
There was a variance or a waiver requested, and Seth was representing the client, and the client's here, so if I say anything wrong, y'all please correct me. The request actually came in that they would put the sidewalk in the right-of-way, but asked for a variance from the requirement to do that when the home is, sorry, let me back up. We require that right now. If you're gonna put a sidewalk in, you have to install it. We've amended the subdivision regulations to require that, and you saw that on Melanie's place last month. What staff does not want to see is these waivers of, some people have to install them, some don't. So we looked at this big picture, where is the connectivity existing? Sidewalks are not on either other side of these lots. So a waiver is not required now if we provide a easement in lieu of a sidewalk. So if there's ever a need for those sidewalks there, we would have an easement. But putting 3 sidewalks that may not get done until a house is built in 10 years is not something.
Yeah, it'd be a sidewalk to nowhere.
Right.
Well, you've
So-
got
run.
Willow Bridge that, for the most part, has sidewalks on one side of the road.
Yes.
You've got Polo Ridge that is kind of like Quail Creek. It was built in the time when we required sidewalks to be built when the house is finished. And that, if I remember, don't quote me on this, but I want to say that subdivision was done 16, 17 years ago. And there's still about a third of the lots in there being held by developers. So you've got mismatched kind of sidewalks there. And then you've got the whole entrance going up to Section Street with no sidewalks. I mean, the reason for the easement is it's a great idea at some point if everybody wanted to get together in there and chip in and build a sidewalk up to Section Street and get a grant to go down Section Street to Battles Road and connect into the Colony and be able to go to the Colony and the golf course and all that would be wonderful. And eventually that'll need to be done because that area is going to be urban out there in the next, 10, 20 years. But at this point, who knows? And that's not that area is not going to develop much more in there. It's pretty much other than a couple dozen lots that haven't been sold that are held by developers, there's not much.
I don't have a problem with the easement in any form or fashion. What I've got a question of is this plat that you're showing right here doesn't show the sidewalk being in the road right-of-way, in the road right-of-way. And instead of being on the property itself, I'm not sure we can approve something in a road right-of-way.
That's what so the easement is to be on private property.
On
not-
private.
Otherwise, we can't put an easement in the right of way.
I got it.
Yes, sir.
And everybody okay with that? Okay.
I can answer any other questions if you have it.
You want me to ask you another one?
Absolutely.
Nah, I won't.
All right, thank you, Mike. Seth, anything to add?
Yeah. I mean, we'll be glad to put the easement inside the property, but just to let you know, the property to the kind of south is owned by the Weeks Bay Foundation, so I don't think you're going to see any sidewalks going back on that side of the road. And going back to the east, to Section Street, again, is the people that, you know, wouldn't be able to develop anything going back to the east because they don't own anything that actually touches that right-of-way. So.
All right. Any questions for the developer?
Nah, but I know Seth can deal with it when it comes.
All right, thank you, Seth.
Thank you.
I'll go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. Anybody from the public wish to speak to this item? If not, I'll close the public hearing. Commissioners?
I make a motion, we approve SD 21.35, subject to staff recommendation of the sidewalk easement.
I've got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second with Holly. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. All right, motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is SD 2137, public hearing to consider the request of Dominion Senior Living of Fairhope LLC for a preliminary plat approval of the reserve at Fairhope 169-unit multiple occupancy project.
Thank you for that.
Mr. Chairman, sorry, got a little informal there. So this is a follow-up to a planned unit development that was approved by the Planning Commission. Its site plan is laid out exactly like we saw. So this is where we get into more technical reviews. But for the public's sake and for clarification, this is 16.6 acres in total, 169-unit multiple occupancy project that consists of 84 independent living, 33 assisted living, and 32 memory care units within the main building. That main building is a big 175,000 square feet building to house those units. There are also 20 independent living cottages contained within 10 separate buildings. The site also has a multitude of amenities, including putting greens, but not limited to the putting green, the pool, the clubhouse, internal restaurants, walking trails, and sidewalks. This is the applicant of the project is Dominion Senior Living of Fairhope, and Jade Consulting, and Trey Genwright is here with the engineer firm and is the engineer of record. This project is located on the corner of Volanta and Greeno Road, so currently consists of two parcels that would be combined into one before construction begins. So that internal property line will be removed. The site layout, as you saw and we approved with the PUD, is shown on the screen. So in effect, the building footprints stay where they are, the roads stay where they are. What we're seeing on this is the confines of the detention and how that's being handled, a little bit about the utilities and the traffic. So first we'll get to the utilities. And what I'll say, what we're doing here is pointing out where the items needing clarification, and then we're getting out of the way for our utility supervisors to handle their business. So water will be provided by Fairhope. It will utilize a master meter to service the large building on the north side of the property, Easements may be needed and will be provided as necessary. Aid to construction may be in play there. Sewer is provided by Fairhope. There will be, as designed right now, a private lift station located on site. Capacity needs have yet to be finalized, but will be reviewed by sewer superintendent, and connections to Fairhope Sewer will include aid to construction cost. Easements, as stated, will be provided as necessary. The power is provided by Fairhope as well. Last we heard, the loads are being determined between Fairhope and the engineers. Transformer pads will be built to Fairhope specs. Fairhope will supply the generators and primary conductor. Lighting will be the responsibility of the developers. And again, easement says will be provided as needed. Gas will also be supplied by Fairhope. Those total loads are being determined, and the applicant is coordinating with Fairhope Utilities. Communications will be provided by AT&T. So as at the PUD, a wetland delineation report was provided. No wetlands in either jurisdictional or non-jurisdictional were found on site. All uplands. The little bit of the drainage narrative, the drainage generally flows north to south, and approximately 9.5 upstream acres are flowing onto the site. That is being contained within the site in pretty, you can look at the narrative and look at the stats and see what the pre and post are provided there. The post-development flows are less than required. The TSS removal is being met, and that is flowing down to an existing 24-inch culvert on what is Hoyle Avenue right-of-way, but not an improved right-of-way. As part of this project, that will be improving the road on Hoyle. There's a potential project just to the south that I believe the engineers are working with that may relocate that culvert and point of discharge, but if that happens, that'll need to be approved by our Public Works Director, Richard Johnson. So looking at the landscaping, as we saw, nothing changed here. 4.16 acres are required, 4.86 are being provided. That does not include any of the retention. What you see on the screen is the green space provided, and you can see the limits of the lot where detention are on the north and south of the property. General comments, all site work, we've kind of asked how this is going to be built and developed. So site work is first by the plan, so we'll get the site ready and infrastructure, and followed by the construction of the main building, and to follow up finally with the cottages. The applicant did agree to provide a sidewalk at the existing crosswalk south of this property across Volanta, a signalized crosswalk. We'll work with the Public Works Department and Richard Johnson for that construction. Internal roads will be private, and will require naming and addressing. I did mention, I think in the staff report, that they have not spoken with AlDOT yet. That conversation has been started and generated. One of the questions we asked at the PUD, and we had one elevation, was what, I think if you looked at the elevations on Volanta, there was a little bit of concern there. How close was that? Was it going to be screened enough when you have this tall of a building? And what I can show you on this last image, it's smaller, but if you'll notice how that steps down and gets to be a little bit of a lower height than not the third story. So as you move from Greeno to the residential, you kind of have that gradual transition into it's undeveloped just to the south of here, but will be more residential. So staff is recommending approval of SD 21.37. The conditions we have are to memorialize some of the lingering issues. So traffic improvements recommended by the traffic study and/or AlDOT will be installed by the developer or under an aid to construction MOU with the city of Fairhope and/or AlDOT prior to CO. Road name shall be approved by Baldwin County 911. Addressing will be provided by the city of Fairhope and shall be complete prior to the submittal of the building permits for vertical construction. Final location of the culvert under Hoyle Avenue shall be approved by Richard Johnson with the City of Fairhope Public Works. Hoyle Avenue is an existing right-of-way. Improvement shall be installed by the developer, will require a certificate of acceptance and shall be warranted and bonded. So because it's an existing right-of-way, we don't have the traditional acceptance of a right-of-way. So the certificate of acceptance of the improvements within that right-of-way will be something that will need to go to our city council for approval. The signalized crosswalk will be approved by Richard Johnson with the City of Fairhope Public Works. Final placement and aid to construction costs for all utilities shall be approved by the respective superintendent. Aid to construction costs shall be determined prior to application of building permit. And that should read prior to receiving the building permit. We received the permit and we're sending that off. Eric Cortinas in our building department is sending that off because of the medical needs and how big of a project it is to Birmingham. There's a code review service that we can pay for. So he's reviewing that. Stormwater maintenance agreement shall be signed and provided to the city by final plan approval. After final plan approval, the stormwater maintenance agreement shall be recorded with Baldwin County Probate. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer those.
Just have a quick question to the retention, the stormwater management area to the south. Feels like it is on that property line, and so I didn't know what kind of buffering would exist between the residential properties to the south and that pond. It's just right up on it.
So and I might have picked this was actually the green space drawing. I picked something with a color looking out on here. If you'll look in your packet on the landscape plans, I believe that will show the limits of and the landscape provided along that boundary.
I just hadn't found it. I see green hatch in other areas. I mean, obviously it's not paved, it's stormwater. I mean, I didn't know though, is there a fence? Is there a tree buffer? What is the buffer between the residential?
I'm going to let Trey explain that one,
Okay.
since he designed it.
Let me ask you a couple questions before Trey comes up.
Sure.
Under traffic, it says that the development will only add 4 vehicles during the afternoon peak time? Okay, that's the first question. Second question is, if this is kind of an assisted living type of facility, they're not going to be people with full-blown automobiles, but they're going to be a lot of people with electric cart vehicles, I'm assuming. All right, okay, I'm just assuming. That's all, that's enough said on that.
Okay.
What does it mean that the applicant submits that existing conditions require the turn lane? I guess that's on Volana. What does that mean? I don't understand what that means. The existing conditions, so who's going to put them in? If it already requires it, then we're going to put this facility here. Who's going to put it in there?
Okay. Let me.
All right, you want to answer that?
I'm not going to be able to remember them if you keep
Okay,
going.
go ahead.
If I can get them one by one, right.
I've got a few more too.
Yeah. So first one, give me the first one because I've already thought of the third one.
The turn lane.
Okay. So the traffic study that was provided required a turn, or mentions that a turn lane is warranted coming on from Greeno onto Volanta. A right turn lane is warranted.
Coming south on Greeno.
On Greeno
Okay.
onto Volanta.
All right.
All right, and you are correct. Our subdivision regulations require a time period of when to search those, or when to do your traffic study. So I believe it's 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 4 to 6 p.m. And that's what the flows, those 4 units or whatever was in the staff report. I can't remember that off the top of my head. There is, I think it's been our stance all along, if there is a failing condition existing right now, then we might have that problem that we're going to resolve when we get around to it, and we're looking for grants and we're looking for MPO applications to fund some of these projects.
Greeno Road is not a city highway, city street.
Yeah, but we have MPO, and some of those projects will allow us to apply especially when you have an intersection of a city road. So when we have a development come in that kind of beats us to our goal, our schedule, well, then we expect that developer to pay for those improvements. Now, there's opportunities out there, I think, for this intersection, so that's why you see our condition
Just the site.
in effect say, hey, it's the cost of the developer, or unless we have can find a project, whether that's a MPO project, an A-trip project, something like that, that can help us with those. It could be a cost sharing or an MOU or something along those lines.
But the answer is somebody's going to deal with it when this development is done.
Yes, that turn
That right?
lane and yes.
Okay, all right, so traffic study did not include the traffic signal analysis for Greeno and Volano.
So
It didn't include that, why?
Skipper, I'm sorry, Skipper Consulting is here to answer any
I'll leave
traffic.
that one for him.
Yep.
Okay.
So-
And then now you're saying that they've reached out to AlDOT to begin dialogue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that answers that question. Now, down here under site and drainage, I don't understand this statement. An existing development directly south of the subject property has been proposed.
Error.
Is it existing or is
Error.
it proposed, and what does that mean?
Yes, not an existing development, a proposed
It's a
development.
proposed development,
Nothing we have an application for. So I believe.
but it's not an existing development.
It is not. So sorry,
Okay, well,
error
that
in the
answers
report.
that.
Yes.
Okay, so there's a proposed development to the south that is going to be
And again,
coordinated.
yes, they're looking at the opportunities for if that outfall will change, location will change. And again, Trey can maybe elaborate on that. We don't have an application for a project, so, we can't really speculate exactly what that is.
And has there been an analysis of a 24-inch culvert going under Hoyle? Is not a big culvert. We all know, right, that a 24-inch culvert doesn't carry 24 inches of water. I mean, not even close. And if 9 acres of water flow onto this place, and we know what Volana Park looks like on a heavy rain,
Yes.
so who's doing that analysis?
That's Jade Consulting.
Okay.
And I do want to, because it is tough sometimes when you're looking at plans and not thinking about the scale, but, when you look at this site plan or another, you can see the detention areas, how large they are, but in essence, I'll let Trey clarify that for
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
Okay?
Hey, Hunter?
Yes, sir.
So are you saying that no improvements are going to be done on Volanta?
There are none required by the traffic study on Volanta exactly. I know the city has been looking at providing a right turn lane for some time. That is not warranted in the
Will
traffic
that be
study.
signalized after when this is developed?
Good chance that will be signalized. And there is, the turn lane analysis is clearly provided. If a traffic signal analysis was done, I missed it. So I'll let Skipper address that if it is. After we get through here, and this is a tough thing for us to do, there's kind of a chicken or an egg, we don't require full AlDOT conversations. If we did that, we'd be waiting on AlDOT. We've got 30 days sometimes.
I understand that. My only concern is the way the road currently is, there's not enough room for a car. If you go halfway across, Greeno, and you get in the middle, unless you're on a motorcycle or something really, really short.
Right.
Either your nose is sticking out in the, in the northbound or your butt's sticking out in the southbound, there's not enough width for a car. And to try to wait till you have the traffic to cross the whole way at once is pretty daunting, even at my age, even though I'm getting closer and closer to needing one of these. But that was my only concern, is that left turn there on Volanta. When I'm on Volanta and I'm gonna go north on Greeno, I cut through the Frisbee golf area around to the back and
go out the front?
And go out that way where my car, I can just cross half the road at a time and you don't have that curve. But
Yeah.
Now, that Volanta making a left turn off of it's pretty,
Yeah, and I do, during the PUD, there was even conversations about that. I can't remember if that was in Planning Commission or City Council, but how that was needed and looking at applications. And I don't want to speak for anyone, but I do believe we have an A-Trip application in or working on something for that work. You know, and if it's warranted, it's up to the developer. If we can have an opportunity to split costs there, that's a great project. So I think that's the intent of our condition. You know, if we can't make it happen, then anything warranted by either the traffic study that they provided or as AlDOT requires. So we'll be on the developer. I think we can work on something together and hope that happens. But if not, we got a problem that there are at least the parking that's, you know, shown. There's at least a good many cars that will have to deal with some of those conditions. That's why we tied that to CO.
thank you, Hunter.
Yes, sir.
Trey, is this yours?
Got one you want to leave us? Fine, right there. Put it on the green one. That's good. Good evening. Trey Jenright, J Consulting. How are y'all? So I am here on behalf of the applicant. The applicant is here as well, and we have brought our traffic engineer, Mr. Scott Skipper, to talk about any traffic issues if you so desire. We have read the staff's conditions, and we're agreeable to those. I believe I'll let Scott dig into the traffic details a lot more thorough than I, but generally speaking, the right turn lane at Volanta coming southbound on Greeno 98 would trigger a right turn lane today without our project. Our project adds minimal traffic. There are spaces there, and the site plan has a lot of parking spaces shown, but as many of you probably know, when people move into the retirement home, they may not be driving, but they're not ready to give their car up yet. So these cars are going to be stationary, and that's why the traffic report kind of looks skewed versus the number of parking spaces that are shown on that site plan. The site plan itself is basically identical as the PUD went through. The green space and things are shown as such. There was a condition with the homeowners on the southwest side of the site where there's some existing vegetation, there's an existing neighborhood there, and we wanted to provide a significant buffer there to protect those trees and to protect that area there. And so that is as it was in the PUD. The northwest side of the site, where the pond is getting closer to the property line, is actually part of an agreement that went with the original seller of the property. This was another 30-acre tract there, and we bought 16 acres of it. It was a condition of that sale that we pick up off-site drainage coming from his site onto our site, so our pond is strategically placed so that we can catch that surface water as it sheet flows across his property onto our site. So the drainage in there is, I don't know that the drawing really shows the scale of how much water comes there, but I hope that you do get a sense that we put some sizable detention facilities in there. We modeled this thing, 24-inch pipe, doesn't carry much water, it overtops Hole Avenue, does provide some storage in there during the rain events. It actually, Hole Avenue today actually operates like an outfall structure. It backs some water up onto the property, holds it and releases it out. What doesn't overtop Hole goes through the 24-inch culvert and releases out. Our site holds back the 2 through the 100-year storm, just like the city's regs require, below pre-development rates. So we're providing more detention than what's there and releasing at a lower rate. To clarify Hunter's comment about us working with the potential project to the south of us, there's a development that is being planned. It's been planned for some time. We're working with those guys on our sewer connection, as well as the storm drainage. There's no secret. There's a lot of water comes off of Highway 98, Greeno Road, traverses down Hole Avenue and enters Volanta Avenue, that point right there. There's a lot of water comes through there, and so that team that's adjacent to us is working on how they want to handle that water, move it to their site, and we are partners with them determining the best place to put that. We're also looking at opportunities to open up
if the city so desires to open up the end of Hoyle Avenue, that's an unimproved right-of-way, we can provide additional detention down there. So those are things that are moving forward as we go, as we move forward with the project. It really doesn't have any bearing on this project, but it's something that we are doing as a neighbor and to make the project as a whole, as a community, a better system. So I think I touched on those, and I'm more than happy to talk about anything else that comes up.
Is this when y'all were here before, when we first started talking about this project, is this the one that all of the drainage enters one of the gullies that ultimately heads toward the bay?
Yes, sir.
Isn't that the one that there were people that were concerned about
This is
that
it,
issue?
and that's why those ponds are so large. This is it.
Okay.
Did
Yeah.
there used to be a Grady pond that was filled on the site, like way before you guys?
I don't know.
There was a Grady Pond here when I was
Yeah, I
a
don't
kid,
know.
but it
There's
was.
Grady ponds all over this county from time
That's
to
right.
time.
They still there.
I was glad to, it looks like you're doing a good job with retaining the stormwater, and part of the concern is not necessarily your problem because you inherited it as is, but historically, maybe more water was held on the site, so.
So I wanted to touch on that intentionally when I was speaking to you earlier, that Hoyle Avenue and the 24-inch culvert reacts as a pond, and then so there is natural storage on that site. And so in our pre-development analysis, took that into account. And so we made sure that we didn't forget about that. And so the water backs almost all the way up to Belanta under large storm events. So that area holds a considerable amount of water, and so we took all that into account.
What about the gully? Because if you remember, I'm sure you do, I do, now that I'm being able to remember back in those dregs of my memory, but there were people here that were concerned about the potential erosion in that gully again. I mean, have y'all revisited that at all?
We have, we've looked at that, and it ties into my whole storyline here of these ponds being as big as they are, trying to titrate this release out as slow as we possibly can. I think the city, not to speak on the city's behalf, but there's probably some NRCS grant money that's going to need to be done, or at least looked at in the near future to try to do some work down that gully.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Okay.
Well, to go back to the question I was asking Hunter, I found the rendered conceptual site plan where there's a little more, it appears to be a line of trees with a shadow along that south, or that north west property line, where the retention is so close to the property line, and I guess
well, we're going to
on
landscape
purpose.
that area in there.
Yeah, that was my question, is that as all of these developments happen along Greeno Road, and they're commercial, and they back up to residential, I also appreciate your photometric site plan, because it's really clear and it shows no light trespass, and that's another concern, but that's what I wanted to hear, is what is the buffer between the residentially zoned properties and?
Yeah, there will be there should be, if it's not, it will be on there, some vegetation down that line. I mean, that's the intent.
And I hate to put you on the spot, because this is something I thought about and just never got around to asking. In the sand filters there in the dry detention ponds, is that something that, I know you've, and I think other designs around have seen where, at least trees with wet feet, is that something that they can be planted along the edge of those
Yes, sir.
ponds?
That's what's in front of my office. Yeah.
I was just thinking.
Yeah.
That what?
Okay.
Say it again?
He was talking about trees with wet feet, so we put in cypress trees or other kind of, trees that like.
Well, typically, that's a good idea if your pond is dug, but if you've got an above-ground berm that controls that, you don't want to put trees on it. After they get to a certain level, and you get a Hurricane Sally or something that comes through,
This
what
is
ends up happening.
This is a good spot for it.
It uproots them, and you got a flood problem then.
Well, so just, I'm thinking about the buffer between residential and commercial areas. And so I'm thinking a fence or a 10-foot, more than maybe cypress trees. And that's what I'm seeking, is what is that buffer?
I guess, it wasn't stipulated in the PUD, and so we're not trying to present more than what was already previously required of. So if you're looking for something else, I'm certainly listening to you, so.
Well, I think in this case, they bought the land from the person that owns that remainder, so that person's got to understand what's going there, and if he wants a buffer, he can do it himself, especially considering the water retention
Yeah,
Gonna be shared.
I'm cautious about putting a fence up or just putting up a lot of vegetation that may slow the water down, because we have an obligation to take that water, and so I don't want to.
Well, we may be looking at it again if they ever do something different. I'm just trying to be consistent. I mean, I recognize because it's a
Right.
PUD, it's a little different, but I'm trying to be consistent with what we require of any other property where there's residential and business and, the view conflict and all that, but.
Wait, hold on just a minute, Trey.
said
Are you
okay.
talking about this area right here?
Yes.
This is an undeveloped, this is not residential right now. It's an
It's
undeveloped point
zoned
that was
residential.
owned by this guy that's,
Gotcha.
I'm assuming
But I'm
that.
just looking at the
I
zoning, it's
understand.
zoned resident,
I
I'm thinking of a future development. I
Right.
guess if it was developed residential,
Yeah.
they'd be here.
Trey, do you understand where she's talking about?
Yes, sir.
That pond down below there, you've got trees drawn in on your
And that
plat.
was strategically, really, I mean, it was an arbitrary distance I put on there just to protect the drip zone of those trees is what we did, so.
Well, no, yeah, with the existing trees, I really appreciate how those ponds move away from them.
Right.
To preserve them. It sounds like the greater good is the stormwater retention that you're providing, and that's why it goes up to the property line, because you're helping out that property. And so I'll let go of the buffering since it's not, but if they develop that property, I think we'll.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Buffering
an
will
honest and very clear burdensome that this property's taken on from that guy. We're handling his water quality volume and everything, so I mean, it's in the report, it's clearly stated that.
Okay.
And if you notice on your zoning, the existing residential lots, other than the portion already owned originally by the same person, does have a water buffer there.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
So
and
it's,
exist-
there's some agreement between this property
some
owner
push
and
and pull.
who they sold to on that side. Alex, there was one comment that we did get from the general public, and we can address that. I think it was just noise during construction that was around
Right.
that area.
And I did print that out and give that to everybody. One of the adjacent property owners was concerned with construction noise and then the drainage, which is already, or the stormwater retention, which has already been addressed, but she wanted to know about the noise of construction.
I mean, I think the city, don't you have a noise ordinance? And
We have a noise ordinance. They can't get started till before 7 a.m. and have to be done.
7 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Yeah. So through these projects, we'll ensure that's happening. I would be a little bit, if they're concerned with noise, I'd be on the lookout for those cannons. They're the ones that's really gonna.
Hey, now that you bring that up, though, make sure that the developers know the cannons were there first, so
Yes.
football season.
We have
Not
said
accepting
that every
complaints
time.
on that, right?
I have a note right here, so we make sure every public meeting we have, cannons go off on Friday nights.
hopefully.
When Fairhope has a good offense, they go off a lot, so.
Any further questions for the developer this time? If not, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Thank you, Trey. Does anybody from the public wish to speak to this item? In that case, I'll turn the meeting back over to the commissioners. Any further questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I move we approve case SD 21.37, reserves at Fairhope, with staff recommendations.
Got a motion from John to approve subject to staff recommendations. Do I have a second? Is that Jimmy?
Yes, sir.
Have a second from Jimmy. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Do we have any old or new business?
Just a couple of updates.
Thank you,
We
Trey.
do have a department committee that some of you are serving on. I'm waiting. It's tough with all of our other committees, trying to get members there. They're trying to have meetings to appoint people, so that's still out there. I'm not ignoring those issues, just trying to get the folks from those committees here. You might see before the next meeting, y'all might see some emails. We're going to sign everyone up as members, commission members for APA, which is American Planning Association. They'll send emails and keep you informed some things. We're also looking at, and I don't know if this will happen before the next meeting, but looking at CAPSO training. CAPSO Lee, I know you and Art, and I don't know if anyone else has ever done that, but that was for Planning Commission Board of Adjustment members. And with COVID, they kind of went on hiatus. We haven't had those for new members. They are now providing those virtually.
So we'll be in communications with you about those classes as well. That's all I have.
Do I have a motion to adjourn? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Good to see everybody here. It's twice this year.